What if I told you that right now, somewhere in Alabama, there are entire towns sitting in complete silence? Streets that were once full of life, schools with children running through the halls, and now, absolutely nothing. Today we are counting down 10 of them, and the story behind number 1 is unlike anything you have heard before. Because this was literally the first capital of the entire state of Alabama. It had mansions, a railroad, thousands of people, and it still ended up completely abandoned. Stay to the end because we are not skipping ahead. Town 10, Frisco City. Pull off the highway in Monroe County and you will find Frisco City, a town that once had more than 50 businesses along a downtown strip, and today most of that is empty space and faded paint. The town went through 3 names before landing here, starting as Jones Mill, briefly becoming Roy in 1913 after a railroad owner who promised a line through town and never delivered, then dropping his name after he failed. In 1928, the St. Louis and San Francisco Railroad finally came through. Streets got paved in 1937, and the town found its stride through the mid-century years. But through the 1980s and 1990s, the downtown hollowed out. A fire in 2001 damaged several buildings, and the school closed permanently in 2009. A town that waited decades for a railroad, got it, grew because of it, and quietly faded anyway. Which makes you wonder how fragile any community's foundation really is. Because the next town was built on something buried deep underground. Town 9, Piper. In the hills of Bibb County, near the Cahawba River, is where the coal town of Piper used to be. And today, almost nothing remains. The Little Cahawba Coal Company established Piper in 1901, named after founder Oliver Hazard Perry Piper. And at its peak, this was nearly 3,000 residents with 500 wood frame houses, 2 mines, and a company store. 6 miners were killed in an explosion here in 1925. And in 1934, a united mine workers' strike brought the Alabama National Guard into town to keep order. When the last mine closed in the 1950s, Piper stopped existing, and today, a beaver pond below the old mine sites is still contaminated by sulfuric acid from the sealed shafts, the earth still carrying the weight of what happened under it. Town 8, Castleberry. There was a time when Castleberry actually smelled like strawberries in the spring. This town in Conecuh County built its whole identity around berry farming, and in 1918 alone, the railroad shipped 150 carloads of strawberries to markets across the country. The governor of Alabama did not officially declare it the strawberry capital until 1987, which tells you just how long that tradition ran. When farming economics shifted and railroad traffic declined, the fields dried up, and the town that once shipped 150 carloads in a single year now has just a few hundred residents. The Strawberry Festival still runs every April, though, which makes Castleberry feel less like a place that gave up and more like one that got left behind while still trying. And that question of whether holding on to an identity keeps a town alive is something the next place answers very differently. Town 7, Silas. Silas sits on the Alabama-Mississippi border in southern Choctaw County, and on a quiet afternoon, it looks like a place that decided to stop and never started again. Before 1880, only 4 families lived in the area, running a cotton gin, a sawmill, and a dry goods store between them. And then, in 1911, the Alabama, Tennessee, and Northern Railroad came through, and everything shifted. Businesses opened, a schoolhouse was built, and a mid-century garment factory employed 200 people at its peak. By the 1990s, the railroad had closed, and the factories had moved overseas, and those 2 losses took the economic heart right out of the community. And the next town shows you exactly what happens when the anchor holding a community together is the river itself. Town 6, Coffeeville. Coffeeville has been on the Tombigbee River in Clark County since 1808, when it was just a landing called Merle's Landing. renamed Coffeeville in 1819 in honor of General John Coffee, a military leader in the Creek War. For decades, it was a river trading post, where goods moved by riverboat down to Mobile, and when road and rail expanded and the river lost its commercial role, the population that sat around 360 in 2000 had fallen to just 263 by the 2020 census. But what gives Coffeeville a particular weight, beyond its commercial story, is 1892, the year it became the site of what locals called the Mitcham War, a violent confrontation rooted in economic and racial tension that drew attention far beyond Clark County. Two kinds of difficult past, and all of it settled into the same quiet. Town 5, Millry. Time moves slower in Millry, and you feel it before you can explain it. According to the Encyclopedia of Alabama, turpentine was literally the cash crop of Washington County, with the industry thriving between roughly 1840 and 1930. Camps extracting pine resin from the forests surrounding towns like Millry for industrial use across the country. When the supply of mature pine stumps declined by the late 1940s and early 1950s, the industry collapsed. The sawmills followed, and Millry found itself without the foundation it had built everything on. At the edges of the forest today, you can still find scarred trees and remnants of those old camps, buried under moss and fallen leaves, the most honest record of what happened here, left in the wood itself. Town 4, Thomasville. Thomasville was founded in 1887 when merchants heard the Mobile and West Alabama Railroad was going to bypass their town. So they picked up their businesses and moved closer to the tracks, and a new community grew up almost overnight, named after General Samuel Thomas, the railroad executive who donated toward its founding. By the time the first train ran in 1888, Thomasville was already a commercial hub. But in 1889, an epidemic nearly wiped it out completely, what locals still call the Thomasville fever, driving families away and closing most businesses. The town recovered, but in 1899, a fire burned the entire business section, 23 buildings and 700 bales of cotton in a single night, after which the town required all new construction to be brick, which is why much of that downtown still stands today. 2 near deaths in 12 years, and the town still slowly lost its way. Town 3, GroveHill. GroveHill still has a courthouse and a few open businesses, but the energy that once made it the administrative center of Clark County has drained away, and what is left feels like a town still trying to remember what it used to be. GroveHill Memorial Hospital still stands at the edge, and locals talk about how the lights on the upper floor flicker on by themselves at night. Almost certainly old wiring, but the way people tell that story, half joking and half not, suggests this town has not fully let go of something. Town 2, Bellefonte. Bellefonte was incorporated in 1821 as the first county seat of Jackson County, and by 1844 it had around 400 residents, a courthouse, a post office, and prominent families who had planted their lives there. 2 decisions combined to hollow it out completely. The citizens rejected a railroad depot through their town, so the depot went up several miles away and trade slowly rerouted around them instead of through them. Then, during the Civil War, Union forces burned the town and destroyed the courthouse, and with it, every Jackson County record dating before 1852. Every marriage record, every land deed, gone permanently. By 1868, the county seat had moved to Scottsboro. By 1880, the town dropped off the census, and by the 1920s, Bellefonte was completely abandoned. A cemetery going back to 1826 and a lone chimney all that remains. 2 decisions, one in a meeting room and one in a war, and together they ended an entire community. Town 1, Old Cahawba. Old Cahawba is Alabama's most famous ghost town, and no other place on this list earned that title the same way. This was the first permanent capital of Alabama, established in 1820 where the Cahawba and Alabama rivers meet, and opponents moved the capital to Tuscaloosa in 1826, using its reputation for flooding, leaving the town nearly abandoned within weeks. Then it came back. With cotton booming in the 1840s and 1850s, Cahawba reinvented itself as one of the most important distribution points in Alabama. Planters built Greek Revival mansions, and when the railroad arrived in 1859, the population climbed to over 3,000. Then the Civil War dismantled everything. The Confederate government tore up the railroad rails. A Union prison in a converted cotton warehouse held over 3,000 soldiers in horrific conditions. And in 1865, a massive flood hit what was left. The county seat moved to Selma in 1866, and by 1903, most buildings had been demolished and shipped away. A town that rose, nearly died, rose again to become one of the most prosperous in Alabama, and was still completely taken apart in the end. Today it is preserved as an archaeological park, where you can walk the original street grid and stand at the confluence of the two rivers that gave this place its name and helped take everything away. And that is what all 10 of these towns share. They were not footnotes. They were full communities with schools and churches and people who built lives and never imagined the streets they walked on would one day go silent. Frisco City, Piper, Castleberry, Silas, Coffeeville, Millry, Thomas Ville, GroveHill, Bellefonte, Old Cahawba. Each one a different story, and somehow all the same story. Because history does not always collapse in a dramatic moment. Sometimes it just gets quieter and quieter, until one day the sound is gone. How many places like these are still out there across America? Places you have driven past without ever knowing what used to stand there. And if that question is sitting with you right now, make sure you are subscribed because we are not done looking.